right, welcome to Electric Vehicle Weekly. So this week we are going to talk about Ford and their proposal to their dealerships, and we're also going to talk about O.N.E. is a battery manufacturer. They've got a 600-mile battery, they claim. We also are going to talk about the U.S. charging network that is about to start. And then we also are going to talk about the Tesla version 4 Supercharger that's getting ready to be put in. And we'll talk about VinFast. Alright, so we are going to start this week with Ford. And before we get to that, I just wanted to tell everybody thank you for being here. I hope we have a good show. We have some good chat. And if you got any questions, go ahead and pop them up in the chat and we'll talk about them as we go through all this. Some of this stuff gets a little confusing sometimes, so feel free to ask questions, and any super chats will get answered first. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we are going to talk about Ford and the new program that they have announced to the dealerships at their dealer meetings, and it's going to change things quite a bit on how we go about things and what the Ford dealerships have to do. So the Ford dealerships were given until October 31st to decide if they want to become Model E exclusive stores, or they can be just an EV certified store, or the last choice they have is to not be part of the EV movement at all. Now, if they choose not to move into the EV realm, then they will only sell gas vehicles, and then in 2025 they'll be asked again. And at that point in time, if they refuse, then there might be a little bit of change in how they go about that. But as for right now, if they choose to be EV certified or EV certified elite, then they've got some money that they're going to have to put up to change their dealerships over. So to be EV certified, it will cost them about $500,000, and they will need to install a DC fast charger for the public, and the public and the store can use. That's part of that cost. And then to be EV certified elite, then it's going to be running about $1 to $1.2 million, and that is going to be to meet all the requirements that Ford is asking for, and that's going to be installing a DC fast charger for the store and a DC fast charger for the public. And then by 2026, they'll have to install a second DC fast charger for the public, and that may also include some level 2 charging. Now, the prices on this are extremely high. So we look at them, we're like $102 million, $1.2 million to install a couple chargers, but that doesn't include any tax incentives that they may get through the state. So they don't know exactly how much it's going to cost. They don't know what dealerships will get incentives from their states and stuff like that. So it's not going to exactly cost the dealership that amount of money, but it could be up to that depending on what incentives they do or don't get. Now, the other thing with being just EV certified, you have to pay that $500,000 to have that one charger installed, minus your tax incentives. The other thing is that they can sell EVs, and they can sell AVs online, but they will not have any demos. They will not receive any demos, and they won't receive any inventory. So it'll be strictly, people will order online, the car will be shipped to the dealership, and then the dealership will deliver it to you. You won't be able to test drive or anything like that from those dealers. Now, if you are a certified elite dealership, you only sell EVs, and you will have demo vehicles, and there will be a limited inventory. So there might be a couple of each model of car or something like that. I don't know exactly what they mean by limited, but at least there will be demos there for you to drive. There's a few other things that go along with this. I'm trying to look at my notes here real quick. The cost of this is the incentives could reduce that amount by 60 to 75%, because there's a lot. Tax incentives are really high on any type of this EV charging infrastructure, as we're going to talk about a little bit later on the U.S. side. So some areas of the country, this is going to be really hard for them to, adapt to, because, not everywhere is keen on these EVs and haven't adjusted to having EVs all the time, or don't sell many EVs. Here in Central Illinois, I think in Central Illinois, there's not a lot of EVs around. I don't see a lot. But up in Chicago, there are a lot more, and there's a lot more charging up there. So let's cover. I'm going to bring you guys another slide here. Here we go. So there's not as many EVs down here in Central Illinois. So I don't know how many of the dealerships in this area would choose to go to the elite status. Now, they might go to the certified status where they can sell the EVs. They just won't have any in stock or won't have any demos for people to test drive. And that may be fine. Some of these will probably do that, and then they'll have to evaluate back in 2025. They're going to revisit all of this. Anybody who hasn't adopted to the elite status, they will come back to them and ask them if they want to move to the elite status or not. And at that point, then they may go back and look at how many EVs they've been selling. How many EVs have been selling lately? Has it ramped up? Is it worth them going fully EVs? And I don't know. Maybe at that time they may not have an option. So we've got, if you choose not to sell EVs at all, then in 2025 you're going to have to make a decision of EV certified, EV elite, or maybe just EV elite. But at least they'll have some time to look at what they have, what is coming in, and what is selling. Does anybody drive any of these EVs, or what do you guys think about having the dealerships switching to completely electric vehicle sales? Also, last week we were having a little bit of audio issue with the timing of the words in my mouth, so let me know if it's too fast or too slow so I can try to make an adjustment. So here we've got, some pictures of some Ford Lightnings and stuff like that, some Mach-E's. Our dealership around here, like I said, I don't see us moving to full electric right now. They will probably stay with EV certified. We just don't see very many EVs around here. I mean, I've seen a couple Teslas, and then we've only seen one other ID4 ever driving around. It's pretty crazy. Now we go by Chicago, and of course there's Ioniq 5s, and there's the Volkswagen ID4s, and there's Rivians, and there's all kinds of stuff up by Chicago. Okay. So the next thing we have up is we are going to talk about O.N.E. I'm not sure if anybody knows a whole lot about O.N.E. But O.N.E. is a startup battery manufacturer, and we got this one and we got this one. Okay, so O.N.E. is a battery manufacturer, and they have apparently a 600-mile battery, which is pretty awesome if it's actually good, if it actually works. So what they have said is they are a Michigan-based startup, and the O.N.E. actually stands for Our Next Energy. So they showed off their prismatic anode-free battery cell this week, and they claim it will lay the foundation for the 600-mile EV. The prototype cell will be integrated into the new BMW iX. The new BMW iX Prototype. Let me see if I can bring you guys a picture of that. It's pretty cool. That one off of there. Alright, so here is a picture of the BMW iX Prototype and about O.N.E.'s battery pack. So you can see there it's got one on it, and those battery packs are lit up. I'm guessing that's just for show, just for a display. But you can see where it's sitting in the battery lineup. It's it's lit up there in the back part of it, and I'm guessing that the front part is the LFP batteries. So this prototype, it says that it's calling its dual chemistry setup the Gemini, and it plans for integration by 2026 with 600 miles of range for a wide platform of vehicles, including trucks and SUVs. Now, I don't understand how they can claim that this will a truck or an SUV could have 600 miles without ever testing that it's going to get 600 miles. Now, we know they possibly could, get a car that hits 600 miles on that battery, but the car on a 600 mile range is not going to be the same as a truck or an SUV getting 600 mile range out of the same battery. So now, whether they're just talking about the battery technology and the size of the battery will be different to make it get 600 miles, which is normal, or maybe they're saying that a smaller size battery they can get 600 miles out of, so they put a normal size battery that we have, say an 80 kilowatt hour battery into a truck or an SUV, and maybe it'll get 600 miles, where in a car or something like that they might be able to go with a 60 kilowatt hour battery that'll get 600 miles. I don't know, we'll have to see how that works out. But they are combining their dual cell Gemini battery is part of their anode free cell chemistry tied with the LFP battery cells, which I kind of mentioned earlier. And if you didn't know, LFP is what the Chinese automakers use and what Tesla uses. And they are projecting a 250,000 mile lifespan, which I don't know if that's amazing or not. I know that we have seen some Teslas out there that are pushing 200,000 miles. And now whether they're on the same battery or not, I'm guessing if people are making a big deal about them going 200,000 miles, then it probably is on that same normal battery. But we'll just have to see what happens and how this ends up. Anybody got any thoughts on that battery? And again, if I'm still having audio issues or something like that, or video issues, let me know so that I can try to fix it. But I don't see anything. I haven't heard anything in the chat yet. Is anybody in the chat? So anyway, we will move on and see what else we've got here. So the next thing that we will talk about is going to be, how about, you guys want to talk about the Tesla Supercharger? Or do you want to talk about the U.S. infrastructure? Let's talk about the U.S. charging infrastructure, because this is pretty interesting. And let me see what we got here. So we've got 35 states get the green light for $7.5 billion national EV charging network. That is a pretty big deal. And this is kind of, what they're envisioning. So President Biden announced at the Detroit Auto Show that the federal government is releasing funds to 35 states to go ahead and start their installing of EV charging hardware, on the way to 500,000 charging 500,000 chargers across the U.S. as part of their own charging network. This is something that I believe is completely separate from like EA, Electrify America, EVgo, any of those, ChargePoint. So this is going to be something completely separate. So I don't know if the government is doing this to, cash in on electric vehicles as we convert over to that, to try to bring in some extra funding into the nation and into these states, or if it is on the stage to take that money and get a hold of these charging networks and actually put money into these charging networks to get these done. That I am not sure how they plan to handle that. But like this picture here, you can see they've got Teslas all lined up on the one side, and in the back you can see where all the Electrify America charging stations are. And I believe those are, this is from California, I think. So, then we will look at, so this is what we got from the information on all of this. So all 50 states had to submit their plans for spending. And then the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Department of Energy took those plans on August 1st and went through and looked at all of their plans. And they did confirm that all 50 states did turn in that information that they needed. Now, $5 billion of the 7.5 is for the national electric vehicle infrastructure. And it has two separate pieces: the charging equipment and installation of that, and the rest is for the software to run it all. So the way it makes it sound there is that this is a complete different charging network. So that'll be interesting to see it now that we'll have another set of chargers. I mean, we've got enough with as many apps as we got to have run everything. Hopefully, this is not another thing where we have to have a special app to use, because then people might be apt to pass over it. So the next thing, the other $2.5 billion is a discretionary grant program aiming at tackling rural charging and underdeserved and disadvantaged communities. So it's nice that they have put a special fund aside for underdeveloped areas. So that's pretty cool. And then the federal government had laid out a $5 billion program, and the states needed to map out their initial routes, primarily along highways and interstates, and they would be designated as alternative fuel corridors. So here is the states that have been approved. And what they want to do is have stations that have 4 150 kilowatt connections for every 50 miles. So every 50 miles, there'll be 4 chargers. And I know some people will complain about it being 150 kilowatt, charging stations, but 150 kilowatts right now will cover the majority of EVs. There are only a handful of EVs that charge, over 150. There are a few that are approaching even 350, but, we really haven't seen anything from them yet. So, or seen much of those vehicles because they're taking so long to get them built. Anyway, so 150 really is pretty good, especially if they're 50 miles apart. I mean, you're driving for maybe an hour and then you'll have a charger, and you drive for an hour and have a charger. I mean, it'll take some of the stress and range anxiety away from people, and may take some of those people that were kind of on the fence of whether they wanted an EV or didn't want an EV, or because of the range and charging network. This might alleviate some of that and convert some of those possible EV owners into fully integrated EV owners. So the problem will have a available $1.46 billion per year to issue out to these states. Now, each state gets a different amount. So the larger states will receive more than some of the smaller states. Like, as an example, California is going to get $384 million, and Texas is going to get $407 million. And then there was one small state that was only going to get like $13 million to put some chargers in there. I can't remember offhand which one that was, but it wasn't. They weren't getting near as much as what everyone else was. Now, that amount of money is spread over 5 years, so it's not they get all of it and then they have to figure out what to do with it. It is actually divided up through the 5 years. And then that will cover about 80% of the cost, and then the other 20% will have to be covered by the state or private funding. And after these first approval batches of states, then the remainder of the states will be approved on a rolling basis. So it's not that these states that didn't get approved already, it's not that they did anything wrong or didn't turn their stuff in right or whatever. It was just that I guess that the government chose these states as needing the charging network worse than others. So my thing is that I live in Illinois, and I live in central Illinois, and in central Illinois we do not have a very big charging infrastructure around here. If I was to leave my house and wanted to drive to a charger, I am looking at a minimum of about an hour drive to get to a fast charger, which is fine because we don't ever use it unless we're traveling. But going from here up to Chicago, taking one interstate that's on the west side of the state, there is a charger that's about 10 minutes off of the interstate in Bloomington. But then it's all the way up to Chicago before you hit another one. And then on the other side, Route 57, there is not one from where I live all the way up to Chicago. And if you go a little bit farther south, then there's one in Effingham. But you're not going to be able to make it from Effingham all the way up to Chicago on Interstate 57. There's no charger in between there. And so that's, there's a lot of states that are like that, and especially in central and rural areas where you're not around big cities that might have a charger. So then if we go back to what we were talking about with Ford and them having to install these DC fast chargers, if you think about it, there is probably a Ford dealership within probably 30 minutes of you. Unless you really live out in the boonies, then you probably are within a half an hour of a Ford dealership. So if they go to that certified elite, they'll have to put in DC fast chargers for the public to use. So you will actually be able to stop there and charge. So that's pretty cool. Now, I believe, that the other thing is I'm not sure how they chose these states, because there's some of them that are on cross-country routes that I can't imagine you're going to drive through this state, and then this next state doesn't have any of those because they haven't gotten approved to start theirs yet. And you might struggle getting through some of those states. But it is pretty cool and a good thing that we are doing this and adding more chargers. And then you got Tesla opening up the superchargers later this year, which that will also benefit. Benefit all of us that are driving EVs. So, where are you guys from? Let me know down in the chat where you're from, how your charging infrastructure is in your state. Let me see here. All right. So if anybody doesn't have any questions about that or anything like that, we will go ahead and move on to our next thing, which is going to be the Tesla Superchargers. So we'll talk about the new version 4 Tesla Supercharger that's getting ready to go in. And is right here. So Tesla is installing their first supercharger version 4 station with a Megapack and solar, and it gives a glimpse at the future. It's quite the headline there. So what is cool about this is that they're installing this Megapack with a solar array, and is going to be done in Yuma County, Arizona. So if you live in Arizona, you're going to want to make sure you keep an eye out for that, because it is going to be quite the infrastructure. So it will have 40 stalls, and one will be fitted as a pull-through for towing vehicles. Now, I'm not real sure why they're going ahead and putting these ones for towing vehicles in yet, because unless they are planning on putting the CCS connectors on there for the Ford Lightning and the Rivian and some others, because the Cybertruck still has not been built yet. Now, maybe this is them saying, hey, the Cybertruck is coming. That's why we're doing this. But with Tesla, we're not sure. It could be another couple of years before we ever see the Cybertruck. But it will have two large solar arrays and a Megapack. The one Megapack can hold enough energy to charge 40 Teslas. Using the solar array to charge the battery pack will greatly reduce the use of the grid. So that's going to keep the prices down on the charging, because if they're using the battery is charging from the solar instead of charging it up from the power from the grid, and whenever you charge, you're actually charging off the solar more than you are the grid, then the electric company is not going to charge Tesla as much money, where therefore Tesla is not going to charge you as much money to charge. because that money's coming from the solar array. Now, it's not going to be free because they had to pay to build this whole infrastructure, but it will greatly decrease the cost. Now, what's interesting is whether they might integrate a thing where into their software, because they're a good company, they're a good software company, that it will be able to tell when you're plugging in, that the charger will know whether you're pulling off the solar off that battery pack, or if you're actually pulling power from the grid and how much. If they do that, then your price might adjust. Like, you might go there one day and it costs you 20 cents per kilowatt, but then the next day you go in there, it might cost you 35 cents per kilowatt, because now that time when you went in, you plugged in and it was charging at a higher rate off of the grid than what it was using off the battery pack and the solar. So, I mean, I think that would be an interesting thing, but I think you might see some people plug in and see the price and be like, nope, not paying the grid, I'm unplugging, and I'll try the next one. I don't know how that'll work, but it says that battery pack will charge 40 Teslas, so that would be like 40 people all getting there at the same time and plugging in. And I don't know how that area is, whether it's a very heavily populated or heavy EV area, but I can't imagine that all 40 of them are going to charge there at the same time. So I could see very minimal power actually coming from the grid. The two solar arrays, I don't know how much power, though I'm not a solar person, so I don't know how much power that pulls in. If it depletes quickly, if it can replace the energy and fill back up quick enough to keep up with the turnover of the cars coming through. That is something that we'll have to see about, because I'm not real sure. Any thoughts from anybody on the superchargers? Anybody got anything for the chat? Where's everybody from? How are you guys doing? Looking on here to see, make sure everything is good here, that everything is accessible. Everything looks like it's running okay. Nobody said anything about my actual everything speed-wise, voice and mouth coming together. Nobody's making any comments about that, so I'm guessing everything is good there. Okay, so the last thing that we have on the docket today is VinFast. So VinFast is a Vietnam company. I'm not sure if you guys are very familiar with them, but VinFast delivered their first 100 VF8s in Vietnam to customers. And they are planning to send out cars to the U.S. in December. Now, this VF8, they apparently have over 60,000 reservations, I think it was. And these first 100, of course, went to Vietnam, and then the next 5,000 that they produce are all going to be sent to the U.S., Canada, and Europe. And they're hoping to have some of them be delivered by December. That is really quick. That's pretty cool. And I know VinFast is looking at a manufacturing site here in the U.S., so that will speed up the process once they get that done, but that's probably looking at more like 2024 before that happens. If you don't have any information about the VF8, it is a 5-seat compact electric SUV. It comes with 2 dual motor all-wheel drive systems. One is called the Eco, and it is 349 horsepower. and has a range of about 260 miles. And then they have a Plus version, which is 402 horsepower and gets about 248 miles of range. Now, VinFast is also the company that is doing battery subscriptions. So if you want to buy a VinFast and you want to own your battery, own the car, everything, full out, you're going to start at $57,000. Now, if you want to do the battery subscription, then the car will cost $42,200, and then you will have a monthly battery subscription. Now, I don't know what the battery subscription cost is, but if the battery subscriptions cost and the payment you're making on the car, if they total up to the same amount that you would be paying on owning the battery at $57,000, then it doesn't make any sense to do a battery subscription. Just buy the car with the battery. The other reason to do this is because when you have a battery subscription, you don't own the battery. VinFast still owns the battery. You're basically just renting the battery that's in the car. So when you go to sell that car or trade it or anything, that other person has to assume the battery subscription. So you have to sign that over to them also. And if they don't want to do that, then you can't sell them the car, because otherwise they're going to be driving a car that you're paying the battery on. So it just really, it gets confusing, and I don't understand why anybody would want to do that. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I think the car looks pretty cool, and that angle right there looks like a Mustang Mach-E to me, the back end especially. That was pretty cool that they took the time to put VF8 in cars. It looks like a lot of people have extra time on their hands. And these pictures are from their event that they had, where they actually gave the first 100 cars and delivered those. So, all right. Okay, that is all that I have for today. So, do you guys have anything you want to talk about? You got any questions on EVs? How about the U.S. national charging network that's getting ready to happen? About the Ford dealerships, what they have and what they're going to have to switch over to. It's going to be a hard thing, I think, for dealerships to swallow. It's pretty crazy. And I think it'll be fine. I don't see why anybody would really have a major issue with this. Like I said, some of them may just choose to do the EV certification and wait the next few years and try out and see how much sales they actually have. How many sales they actually have on EVs before they jump into that EV elite status and have to put in all that extra money. But if they do the EV certification, then they're going to have half that money paid already. And so then it'll be less of a burden on them later on to put up the other half to get the other chargers put in. But the EV charging and infrastructure, that I think is going to be a good thing for everybody. But of course, we're not going to really probably see any major things happen probably for another year or two before you really start seeing these things popping up everywhere, because they've got to talk with vendors and get these charging units in, figure out where they're going to put them, start construction. So I would say at the earliest, we might see something around late summer or fall. Some of these pop up. It's possible to see them in the summer, but I wouldn't expect to. So if anybody doesn't have any questions, I'll just give it a few minutes here. If you don't have any questions, then we will go ahead and get off here and end the stream, and I will see you guys next week